All right, welcome everybody. Today is January 25th, 2019, and we are going to get started with this U.S. History Semester 2 study session. Because there are no live students, we're just going to go ahead and jump right into the content. That may change as this is supposed to be an hour-long session. So let's just go ahead and take a look at the agenda for today. Today's agenda, we're going to go over the assignment instructions for Activity 7.3.2, the war in Iraq. We're going to spend about 15 minutes on that, and then we're going to, if we have live students, we'll do some Q&A. And then the second part, I'm going to just do additional tips for 7.3.2. So if you're watching this from home, you're going to get the direct instructions in the first half. And then if you feel like you got to get hang of it, you don't have to watch the second half. But if you feel like you do need some more tips, then stick around for part 2, and we'll go over some things that might help you even more with this assignment. All right, so the instructions in your assignment say the following. In this activity, you will provide answers to the following 2 questions. You can use the information that you learned in this unit as well as this resource that you previously reviewed. And the link is to, if you were to click on this, it will take you to a website that discusses the war on terror. And it looks like this. And you're actually going to scroll down to not where it says 9/11, but you're going to scroll down to where it says Iraq. So, I mean, if you want some background information, you can read all the other stuff, but really you should start reading where it says Iraq. And of course, you should read the lessons that deal with this topic in particular. All right. Let's see, where were we? So you're going to have the 2 questions. The first question is, why did President Bush see the need to invade Iraq? That's the first question. The second question is, what were the results of the Iraq War? And it says to provide your answers, and take note of this. It says with at least 2 to 3 complete sentences each, and use evidence from the text to provide your answer. Upload your response to the Dropbox when you are ready to turn it in. So look at that, 2 to 3 complete sentences each, and evidence. If you do not have, if you're missing any of those things, then you will not receive full credit. So make sure to receive full credit that you're focusing on answering the 2 questions with 2 to 3 sentences and evidence. All right, so the steps for completing this assignment, if you're having difficulty with it, is first of all, always review the questions, always review the instructions, but review the questions. And again, you have 2 questions there. Why did President Bush see the need to invade Iraq? And what were the results of the Iraq War? So keep these questions in mind as you read the lesson and as you reread the lesson, because you should have already have read the lesson, and as you read the website provided. So keep those 2 questions in mind. And then, you know, as you read, you might find the answer. Okay, step 2, review the lesson in the website. The lesson that this pertains to is lesson 7.3, the war in Iraq and the fight against terror, because those things they go hand in hand, and you're going to focus on pages 1 to 3, 1, 2, and 3 of that lesson. Okay. So we're continuing this. Step 2, continued. So the reading from the website, the war on terror, like I said earlier, make sure that you scroll down and you read the section titled Iraq and read the first 3 paragraphs. And I would even say to read the entire thing, not just the first 3 paragraphs. So let's see. So it does say the first 3 paragraphs, but I actually recommend reading the whole thing because you'll get even more information so long as you're reading, if you're reading the entire thing. And again, there's just an image of where I circled where you need to begin reading. All right, step 3 is to write your answer. And let's look at some things to consider. I'm going to help you out a little bit with this assignment. So the question number 1 asks, why did President Bush see the need to invade Iraq? Make sure you focus on the reading about weapons of mass destruction. the effects of 9/11 and issues of terrorism, and existing strained relationships. If you write any of these down exactly as I have presented them here, you're not going to get credit because you have to explain what the reasoning was regarding each of these topics. So what happened? What were each of these topics? What did they have to deal with? So make sure you pay special attention to weapons of mass destruction, the effects of 9/11 and the issues of terrorism globally, and then existing strained relationships already with Iraq. So that's for question number 1. For question number 2, what were the results of the Iraq War? So again, some things to consider while you're writing your answer is look at the Iraqi deaths, civilians especially, the turmoil itself within the nation that the war caused, and also that it kind of already existed anyway, but the war did not help. And then make sure that you look at resentment that actually grew because of US occupation. And then issues with the occupation of Iraq itself. What were some of the issues themselves? If you're watching this at home, you can feel free to pause, rewind as you need fit, so that if this is going too fast, you can go back, you can pause it, read the slide, take notes, or even complete the assignment while you're also watching this video. All right, we're continuing step 3 where you're writing the assignment. So it says, reminder, provide your answers with at least 2 to 3 complete sentences each. So you have ideas, you have your evidence now. Make sure you're writing 2 to 3 complete sentences for each answer. All right, we're gonna go ahead and go straight into part 2. But if you're watching this at home and you do have questions, feel free to contact me, and I'll have my contact information at the end, very end slide of this presentation. But you can contact me, and if I don't respond right away, you can either choose to submit the assignment as it is, and then I'll set a retry, or you can ask me that if you want to redo it, or you can just put it aside, come back to it later, and work on something else in the meantime. Totally up to you. Okay, so here's some additional tips. So you got the straightforward assignments, instructions, and help in the first part. But here's some additional tips. Like I said earlier, complete all of the readings. A lot of students have tried to skip through the readings on this assignment and are just kind of skimmed, and they get confused. And we'll talk about that in a little bit about the confusion. So always read instructions and readings. Read them twice, 3 times if necessary. So a lot of students will read something and then instantly get a hold of their teachers. And that's what we want you to do. We want you to reach out. However, we also want you to become, a responsible learner, meaning, okay, I didn't understand that reading the first time. I'm going to read it again, and I'm going to read it a 3rd time. If you still don't understand the readings, if you still don't understand instructions after 2 or 3 times, then yes, you definitely need help. But I know myself as an adult, I can read something twice and not be fully paying attention because my mind is somewhere else. I'm thinking about what I'm gonna make for dinner, or I want to take my dogs for a walk, and so I'm not fully focused on the task at hand. So I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna read it several times. Or it could just be that it's a difficult reading. There are lots of things that are difficult to read, so you have to read them over and over and over again. And again, contact your teacher if you need help with this or any assignment and you have read the lessons instructions multiple times. And if you need help with the retry, or you need a retry set. So let's say you turned in the assignment and you didn't score what you wanted and you think you could do better. If I have not set a retry, then contact me and I'll set it for you. I usually don't set retries on anything below 70%, just because I think that's a fair score. I think once you hit in the 60% and lower range, then it will affect your grade. Sorry, I meant to say, I don't usually set anything a retry for 60% and above. So that means that you've passed. If you scored below 60%, you have failed, and I definitely set a retry automatically. Either way, contact me if you want one. Okay, some additional tips for this assignment. These are the common mistakes to avoid, and this is what I was talking about earlier when I say don't skim the information, because this will happen if you skim the information. A lot of students confuse Iraq. So the leader at the time was Saddam Hussein. When we're talking about the war in Iraq, they confuse it with Afghanistan. and Osama bin Laden. While there's some ties because of Bush's fear of terrorism growing in the Middle East, you know, Afghanistan is the nation that harbored Osama bin Laden. Well, a lot of people didn't know, but don't confuse those. Those are not interchangeable for this assignment. So make sure you're focusing on Iraq and not Afghanistan. And make sure you're reading the correct sections, basically. You're starting that website reading at Iraq, okay? And I have a map here to show you the difference between where Iraq is and where Afghanistan is. So there's a big old nation called Iran that is between those two nations. So two very different nations in different locations. All right, some more common mistakes to avoid. I find students will not write in complete sentences, or they're not meeting the number of sentences, what's required. So they're not writing a complete sentence, or they're not, again, meeting the 2 to 3 sentence requirement. So here's an example. Here's a complete sentence. President Bush saw the need to invade Iraq because, and then they have said why. So that's a complete sentence. They have said why, and they have basically rephrased the question into an answer. And here's an example of an incomplete sentence. There were lots of reasons. War, turmoil in the nation. Those are not complete sentences. There were lots of reasons. There's no subject. What are we talking about? There were lots of reasons that Bush saw the need to invade Iraq. That would be acceptable. Some of those reasons were war, turmoil, war and turmoil in the nation. That's a complete sentence. But what you see here is these are incomplete sentences and will not receive full credit. So keep that in mind, please. Okay, some more additional tips. Some students are not sure what is meant by use evidence from the text. So what this means is that you're not just nilly-willy answering a question based on absolutely no facts or evidence. So think of it as facts, using facts and information from the reading or the lesson to support your argument. I'm giving you an example here. I don't want to give you an example directly from the class because then you'll use it. But I'm going to give you an example of World War II. So facts and information. So let's say the argument is that World War II was a costly war for the United States in terms of lives lost and cost, monetary cost. Okay, so that is an argument. Now let's back those arguments up with facts and information. Here's a fact. The US spent $314 billion and there were 407,318 deaths. Okay, so you have an argument and you have a fact or information from a reading or from a source that backs up your argument. Okay, so remember, use evidence from the text. Okay, so you can use a direct quote in your as your evidence. Hi, welcome. Nope. I thought somebody joined us. So you can use a direct quote from the reading or reference the information indirectly. So here's what I mean by that. Let's say you use a direct quote. World War II was a costly war for the United States. Oops, and I forgot. No, I did put a direct quote in there. So here's the argument. World War II was a costly war for the United States in terms of lives lost and cost. Economically, quote, this is from the source, adjusted for inflation to today's dollars, the war costs over $4 trillion, and in 1945, the war's last year, defense spending comprised about 40% of gross domestic product, end quote. So you could do that. You don't want to have more than that in quotes. That's actually kind of even a long quote, but if you feel like your evidence needs to come directly from the text because you're having a hard time rephrasing it, then please put it in quotes because those are not your words. You can also put in indirect evidence. So you could say, according to the reading, the US spent by today's standards $4 trillion, and in 1945 alone, most of the nation's GDP came from defense spending. So if you look at this, this is restating the quote, so it's not writing it word for word, and it says according to the reading. So that is more of an indirect use of evidence. So one is using quotes, the other one is rewriting it in your own words, but still attributing the reading. All right, here's some sentence starters. If you're having a hard time just getting started, that's the hardest part of writing, I think, is writing that first sentence, because that first sentence really is going to define the rest of the writing. Here's some sentence starters for you. For question number 1, why did President Bush see the need to invade Iraq? So here's some possible ideas. President Bush saw the need to invade Iraq because, that's one way you can start it. Another way you can start it, there are several reasons that President Bush saw the need to invade Iraq. One of those reasons was, and then you can say the reason and the sentence, and then you can start another sentence that says, a second reason was. For question number 2, what were the results of the Iraq War? Here's some possible sentence starters. Some of the results of the Iraq some of the results of the Iraq War, which I forgot to put in there, were. And then another way you could start it is the outcomes of the Iraq War were. I apologize for not putting war in there. So those are some ways that you can start your sentences. I highly recommend that you review the rubric. A rubric, for those of you who are not sure what it is, it's basically an outline that says what you're going to score. If you only, or let me rephrase this, what you need to do to score a certain grade. So if you want to score an A, you need to do everything that's in this column. If you want to score a C, you just want to get by, then you need to do the minimum here. And then if you got an F, you go back and you read the rubric. This is why you got an F. So to score an A, to score a C, and to score an F, or if you scored an F. So what this means is this 40% that you're going to be scored. So let's say this is out of 100%, 40% is going to be scored for organization. So if it's organized with 2 or more complete sentences, and then the content. So your examples and your evidence. So we're looking for organization, but the biggest comes through content. And if you're unsure how to read a rubric, I'll be more than happy to re-explain this to you in a one-on-one meeting. But this is always going to be located in writing assignments. So it's a really good idea to look at them and see, you can go back and see why you scored a C, or what you need to do to score a certain grade. So you can use it proactively, or you can use it as more of like, okay, I got a C on my assignment. Why did I get that? Okay, once you have turned in your assignment and you've edited it, and you have looked at the rubric and made sure you have all your information in the assignment, met all the requirements, and you turn it in, then you get it back. Make sure you always check your score on assignments, and check for feedback. So again, if you scored below a 60%, always redo assignments, because that could eventually bring you down to a point where it might be the week that your class is due and you're below a 60%. That's really going to set you back, because you have to have a 60% or higher for a class to count, or to even pass a class and to take a final. So always make sure that you score above 60% on your assignments. So check your score, and I've showed you here, this person, they turned in the war in Iraq, activity 7.3.2, and they only scored 25%. So they would click on the icon, on the chat icon, and then as soon as they click on the chat icon, it would give you teacher feedback. Hey, make sure to read the website provided to find your answers. So this student did not use the website, did not use the lesson probably. You must also write 2 sentences for each. So it looks like that student needs to go back and redo the assignment to include this. So please make sure you always check your grade and check for feedback. All right. because we don't have any live students, we're not going to do any Q&A. However, again, please contact me if you do have questions about this class, about assignments, or about even any other social studies classes that you may have, whether I'm the teacher or not. If I'm online, feel free to get a hold of me. And thank you very much for attending. Here's my contact information. And have a fantastic week. Thank you again for attending.